Hello, good morning and welcome back to another video. It is a really nice sunny day today, and so we thought it would be a perfect opportunity to talk about our solar system, not the planets and stuff, but our solar power system. We've had this for a while now, I think getting on for 2.5, 3 years, and we've still got all the things that we had before, but we have made some changes, and so we're going to show you some of those in this video. And of course, most importantly, we're going to talk about why we've done it, how we've done it, and of course that there are many other ways to do it, but this one works really well for us. So just as a quick refresher, what we used to have is 6 panels out here, which we still have, and then all of the equipment, all the batteries, all the inverters, all the solar charge controllers were in the wooden shed that you can just about see behind me. And we still have some stuff in there, but most of it has moved, has been relocated to the house, and we'll give you a quick tour of the system first, and then we'll talk about some stuff in a bit more detail. So let's go and start over by the panels, and then we'll go into the shed. Okay, so these are the panels that we have and have had since the beginning. They used to be wired up as 3 sets of 2 in parallel and then fed back to a combiner box inside the shed, which combined the power from all of the panels into one big feed that then went into a solar charge controller to charge the batteries and power the inverter. So we still have the same 6 panels. They're still mounted in exactly the same place, although we'll talk about the mounting in a second, but they are just wired differently. So instead of 3 sets of 2, we now have one big string, which starts on one side and kind of feeds all the way through to the end and then back to the shed. And the reason for that is some of the changes that have happened in the shed. We now have a system that needs a big string of panels rather than lots of small ones. So something that will change here in future is these panels are going to be moved from being ground mounted to being mounted on a roof. But it's on a roof of a structure that we haven't built yet. So over here, slightly off to the side, we're going to be building a carport, kind of like a big garage, with a small storage shed, but with a large covered area where we can park cars, or mowers, or chippers, and winemaking equipment, and all that kind of stuff. But most importantly, put all the panels on the roof. And so we have these 6 panels here now. We've actually bought another 6. I just haven't had time to set them up yet. And we've got so much sun at the moment that we really don't need them at the moment, but they're for the winter. But in future, the carport structure that we're going to put here, we've got space for 20 panels, but I think we're probably going to put 16 up there. But we've got a bit of extra space if we need it, which is good. And these 6 panels are actually going to be relocated to the roof of another structure, and we can talk about that a bit later on. So with that set up, let's go into the shed and show you what has changed in there. So welcome to the shed, which used to house a lot more of our solar equipment. Now it's just got these 2 pieces that you can see on the wall. We used to have a whole load of batteries down below as well, but everything has been moved to the house. And actually we only need one of these things in here, but I've left the, this is the DC combiner box, just because most of the panels were already wired into it. So in the future we'll just have this Fimer thing up here, not in the shed, but in the carport structure. So let me explain what this is, because this is a very different kind of system than what we used to have. And actually this is a system that I didn't know anything about, or this type of system was something that I only learned about through working with the guys at Solar Shop who helped me design the system, but we did do all of the install ourselves. So this thing is called a string inverter. An inverter is basically something that takes in one kind of power and converts it into a different kind of power. And the reason you need something like that is the kind of power that solar panels produce is not something that your kettle or fridge or microwave or dishwasher can use. So there needs to be some kind of conversion. The old system, which we're still using most of, is something called a DC coupled system. So the solar panels, which are DC, connect to the batteries via a charge controller, and then that feeds an inverter which produces the AC power for all the appliances. And we will still have that in future, but we have added this. And what this string inverter does is it converts the solar panels from DC to AC up here, and then sends that AC down to the house. And so this is known as an AC coupled system. And at the moment we just have this. We used to have the DC coupled, we now have the AC coupled. In the future we are going to be taking advantage of both, because they both have their kind of strengths and weaknesses. And I don't want to get into all the technical details because it's probably not what you're here for. If you want to learn more about the technical side of solar, then there's loads and loads of information out there on the internet. We're just going to try and give a high level overview of what we have, how it works, and why we chose it. But one of the great things about this is it will produce AC right here in the shed, or in the future in the carport, which means we can feed a fuse board or a consumer unit right here and power the things in this room, or in the future power our carport. So we've got lights and sockets and stuff like that, and then it sends all of that power down to the house, which feeds the consumer unit in the house and then connects up to all the other solar stuff. And it does all of that with just one cable, which is what convinced me to go for this kind of solution up here in the first place. Previously we'd looked at running lots of DC cables around the place, and we were going to have to run, I think, 5 separate cables to get the same result compared to 1. The other nice thing about this unit is it will generate up to 6 kilowatts of AC power, but you can actually plug in up to 7.5 kilowatts of solar panels. So that's what we've got going on in the shed. And whilst there are a lot of benefits to this system, which we've tried to explain, one of the downsides of this system is it's not as good for charging batteries. It still works, and any excess power is diverted to do that. But because it does quite a lot of conversion from DC to AC, and then from AC to DC to charge a battery, because batteries are DC powered, it's not as efficient for doing that. And so there are some losses in the system. And also our shed here and the carport is quite a long distance from the house. We've got a cable that's about 50 meters long, and so there are some losses in that length of cable as well. But these are just things that we have to deal with. And in the future we will also have the DC coupled system as well, which is much more efficient at charging batteries, because it goes from solar panels in DC straight into batteries in DC. There's no conversion there. But a DC coupled system is not as efficient at powering lots of high powered appliances like heat pumps or breweries or canning stations, which we will have all of those things in the future as well. And so instead of trying to choose for us which one is best, which way to go, we're just going for both and having the best of both worlds. Cool. I think that's probably enough up here. Let's head down to the house and show you where all of this stuff culminates and some of the changes that we've made inside there. We want to stop here for a moment.
So, yes, I do. So Guy mentioned a DC coupled system, which is what we had before. We now have an AC coupled system. In the future, when this building is redone, we will put more panels on the roof here, because we'll design the roof to be in the right direction for the sun. And we will install a DC coupled system here, which will connect to the batteries that are going to be in the house. So we've thought this out for the long term. We only have the AC coupled, but this will come, the DC coupled system will come when we do this building.
Yes.
Okay, moving on.
Yeah, probably one of the most complicated things about this whole thing has been trying to work out where we want to go with the whole thing in the end, and then trying to work backwards from there and install the things that we need at the time, that we have the buildings for or the space for at the time. But so far it's been working really well to do it in this kind of staged approach. Okay, here is the new and improved, but mostly the same, solar equipment. We had many discussions about where we were ultimately going to site all of this equipment. We talked about building a shed outside, we talked about putting it all up at the carport end and running power down to the house, but ultimately we've settled on putting it in the house, in the small room, the utility room, where we've got all the heat pump stuff and the underfloor heating stuff. We're also going to have a big networking hub in here as well, and that felt like the best place for it all. All of the technical stuff in one small room, but all inside in the house, so it's safe, it's secure within the building. So let me talk you through what we've got in here now. We used to have one inverter, one of these here. We now have 2 of them running in parallel. So we used to have up to 5 kilowatts of power, maximum power at any one time. We now have double that, up to 10. And they can actually deliver up to 20 kilowatts for a peak of, I think, up to about a minute or so. So if there is something that kind of pushes it over briefly because of startup power, then they can actually handle that, which is good. And then the other major new thing in here is this big grey box over here, which is where all of the fuses and all the cables have been nicely kind of hidden away and tidied in there to keep them out of sight, because they don't look great when there's a mess of cables, but also to keep it safe, because we've got a whole bunch of DC stuff going on in this box, and they need very big fuses. We have 200 amp fuses and 100 amp fuses, and so to have those like visible on the wall, like we used to have, is not great. So the guys at Solar Shop put together this box, and they pre-mounted all the fuses in the right locations, and they've got some really big chunky bits of copper in there to distribute the power both on the positive side and the negative side really nicely. And then the other thing that has changed, we used to have one rack mount of batteries, we used to have 4, we've now added a second rack with 2 batteries in that. So we now have 6 batteries, which gives us, I think it's 14.5 kilowatt hours of battery storage, and we've got space to add another 4 if and when we need them. And since we bought the first round of batteries, the company that makes them, called Pylontech, have actually now added larger batteries to their repertoire. So these are all 2.4 kilowatt hours each, and they now have a 3 something one and a 5 something one as well. So if we need to put bigger storage into the same amount of space, then there is an option for that as well. But at the moment, we don't have a huge amount running, we don't have a huge amount turned on, because we're not really living here, it's still a building site. And so whilst we have some data about our power usage and what our kind of general tick over is, we don't yet really know how much we're going to use on a daily basis or on a weekly basis or whatever. So there's a lot of scope for making adjustments and adding and scaling the system if we need to. So that is pretty much the tour. There isn't a huge amount to it. There's a few components, they all talk to each other. There's lots of network cables and stuff going on so that all the different devices can communicate, and they all know the status of everything, the state of charge, and how much power is coming in and how much power is going out, which is really useful. It's also cloud-based, so I can monitor it from anywhere in the world if I want to, but that does sound a bit weird. But it's a great system, and we're really happy with it. And I really like the way that it looks in here. I put quite a lot of effort into making it look neat and tidy and as professional as I could, because I always like to think that if something looks good, then it is good. That's not always true, but I like things to look nice as well as be functional. So shall we talk a little bit about some of the reasons why we've done this and why we've chosen some of these things and all of that stuff? So maybe we should start with, why have we gone off-grid in the first place?
Yeah, and we get asked this a lot because the house did have power when we bought it. It very quickly got disconnected, and there is several reasons. And so
as always,
I'll start with probably the one that is most likely to be different to many other countries. So, energy in Portugal is tier-based, and it's not tier-based on usage, it's tier-based on the amount of energy you can use at any one time, or the maximum power that you can be consuming. So if you have a kettle on, a toaster on, an oven on, etc. And as those tiers get bigger, the cost per unit of energy also gets bigger. Now we know that we are going to be a relatively high energy usage customer because we have a heat pump system, we've got brew kit, I'm going to have a workshop, we've got canning gear, guy likes to cook with multiple ovens. So we're going to be in one of those top tiers, and I think it goes something like, and don't quote me on this, there's a 3 point something, a 4 point something, a 6.9, I don't know what, there's something else in the middle, and I think the top one is about 13. But this is the biggest point, is all those top couple of tiers aren't available to every home, and because we live out in the middle of the rural area, it's very unlikely that the cabling on the street goes anywhere near that. So that's one of the reasons. It's very unlikely that actually we could get the power that we wanted, and if you can't get that power, then you need to go 3-phase, which is very much more complicated. You need to go through a whole approval process, and actually when we bought this, I'm going to guess that it was on the lowest rate, like the 3 point something or maybe 4 point something, because all they had was a couple of sockets and some lights. So for us to even get it turned back on and that to move up a grade, the whole house would have had to be rewired first before they would even connect that to the house. And anyone who lives in Portugal, who has visited Portugal or is in any of the Portugal Facebook groups will know that the paperwork to do any of that kind of stuff is crazy and can take several years. And we were not willing to do that. And so it made the decision really easy for us. We were like, well, we want to have this staged approach. We want to be able to wire our house at a speed that suits us. And so we were like, well, we'll just start with a small off-grid system and then we'll scale it up as we go. So that's one of the biggest reasons, was just the availability of the power on the street and the the way in which it would have meant we had to do this renovation in terms of the rewiring. Secondly, I'm not a fan of fossil fuels. I'm not a fan of any company who promotes fossil fuels. All of the big energy providers here, while they have a lot of renewables, are still supporting and kind of giving a knee up to those fossil fuel companies. And from a values perspective, that just doesn't sit well with me. All of the people who invest in those companies get a profit or a share based on fossil fuel usage, and I just don't agree with that. So I didn't want to go that route, and energy companies are just really painful to work with. I mean, any telco company, any of the big companies are just difficult, and I would prefer not to have to deal with them. So that was a value-based or ethical-based decision. That's mostly me, not Guy. So those two things together were just like, yeah, it's just easier to go off-grid.
Another big part of it is the self-sufficiency aspect. And that's a big part of our move here to Portugal. We want to grow more of our own food, renovate our own house, all of that kind of stuff kind of fits with our approach to how we want to do a lot of this stuff. And most people will probably be aware of the recent energy crises and the fact that that's just going to continue. Obviously, we don't know how it's going to continue, but when there is so much uncertainty, if we can have certainty by being responsible for our own power generation and also know how the whole system works, so we're almost self-sufficient in repair work as well, because we installed the whole system, then that just gives us a lot more confidence, or I don't know what the other word would be. Control is a good word. Control of the system, control of the future from an energy security perspective. And we're fortunate that we are in a position that we can invest in this now. And because we are planning to be here for some time, like 20 years, 30 years, however long, it will pay itself back. It has been an upfront investment rather than a few €100 here and a few €100 there for a monthly electricity bill. But because we are high energy users, or will be in the future, and because there is so much sun here in Portugal, even in the winter, we think this is a good move for us. But really, over time, the data will either prove or disprove that. And we are willing to be wrong, but I kind of think that we're right. And I guess something else that has driven a lot of this decision making and investing in this system, and we'll talk about the costs in a minute, I guess it's my curious mind. We'd done a lot of research into solar, watched a lot of YouTube videos about various different sizes of systems, all the way from like a small cabin in the woods to an RV to massive houses that are powered purely on solar. And having seen that, I was like, I wonder if we can do that. And I like the idea that we can. I like the idea of being able to show that it is possible to run an entire house with all the modern conveniences, because I don't want to compromise on comfort and convenience, but I do want to be in control of the situation. And of course, one of the big things we have to look at is, does it make financial sense? But we are willing to be the guinea pigs and to do the experiment and to invest in this, having done a lot of research and being fairly confident, but to be the ones who install it, who gather the data, who openly admit how it goes, whether it works or not, how much we spent and all that kind of stuff. Because that is the beauty of this wonderful platform that we are all enjoying right now, is through watching other people do stuff, you can learn things and you can decide whether it works for you or makes sense for you. But without people doing it and sharing it, it's hard to know what's possible. And so that's one of the things that drives us to do this stuff, is to not just see if it's possible, but to show if it's possible. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. Shall we talk about the cost?
The initial install that we had was 6,250 all in, not including any of the electrical wiring of the house component. So just the solar equipment, 6,250. And then we've added to that with more batteries and the second inverter and the Fimer out there and some cable runs and another 6 panels. Yes, that second phase is then 7,250. So we're in for 13.5. We have another couple of phases to go. So they include moving all the stuff up onto the carport. So that might cost us a little bit more cable, but nothing. We already have the panels, we have the gear, etc. And then the fourth phase is when we do the outbuildings and we put more panels up on the top there. We already have the charge controller for that. So this is the DC coupled system. So there'll be some more cabling, there'll be some more panels, but it shouldn't be anywhere near as much as we've already invested. It will be a couple of more thousand. But yeah, 13.5 all in, which should get us quite some time before we need to do any more work to the solar system.
Okay, I think that is pretty much all we have to say, and hopefully we've answered most of the frequently asked questions. But if you do have more questions, whether they are high level or a bit more detailed and technical, do stick them down below. And if we get lots of similar ones, or if we get lots of questions, we'll do a follow-up video. Of course, we will do follow-ups in the future as the system expands and as we get more data and all that kind of stuff. But if there is something specific that you want to know about what we've done or how we've done it, then do let us know and we will do our best to answer you. But I think we'll leave it there for now. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.